Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanamzalak.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for a fourth episode of season 17, a very special guest and practicing self-care expert coach, Katherine Babcock. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Katherine, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. After going through exactly what you do, we could have used you a lot over the years. My name is Katherine Babcock. I'm a single mom who lives in Denver, Colorado. My kids have all grown up somehow and miraculously become adults at this point. So it is just me and my two dogs who live in the house now. I have a 5.5-month-old puppy, and I don't know exactly how I got into that or why I got into that because she is a piece of work. In fact, she's chewing on my fingers as we speak. She is cute though. So I am, as you said, a self-care expert. And I didn't even know what that was until just a couple of years ago. I was, to give you some background, I was disabled very young. I was a paramedic and blew my back out. I had Evan, my oldest son, when I was 19, and he came out backwards. Everyone knew that something was wrong when he was born. He didn't want to be picked up, but he didn't want to be put down. He didn't want to eat, but he didn't want to not eat. It was just a very chaotic time. And being a first-time mom, I didn't know what I was doing. I was relying on other people to kind of help me navigate what was supposed to be going on. Fast forward a little bit, I had two more kids, and Evan still was a real piece of work. He was diagnosed at 3 with ADHD and bipolar. He was suspended from school many, many, many times as he was growing up. We did a lot of family therapy and individual therapy for the kids. But as time went on, I would try to listen to the therapists, and the school system would get mad at me. I would try to listen to the school system, and the therapists would tell me that I was doing something wrong. So no matter where I went or who I tried to get information from, it was conflicting with someone else trying to help. And that brought up a lot of social services interventions. The school would call. I distinctly remember one time, we were fighting about Evan taking a coat, and it snows a lot in Denver. And he didn't want to take a coat to school. He was in elementary school. And the therapist said, well, let him suffer natural consequences. You don't take your coat, you're cold at school, you'll take your coat next time. Well, I didn't send him with a coat, and the elementary school called social services on me for being a neglectful parent. So I was caught in between that a lot of, that happened more times than I could count. And it became very discouraging. I became very worn out. I didn't have anyone else. My ex-husband is not in the picture at all. And so I got no child support, no financial help. I was raising 3 kids on $550 a month, trying to do my best to get everybody to therapies when they needed to be there. I tried to enroll Evan in many different activities, Boy Scouts, soccer, football, and we just couldn't participate because his mental illness was so significant that it just made it too hard. He couldn't get along with the other kids. It was just always an issue. And fast forward a little bit more, in high school, my daughter, as Evan was in high school, my daughter was diagnosed. She started self-harming, and she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and ADHD. So I really had my hands full. And when Evan was in high school, he developed a heroin habit. And it wasn't a small habit, it was a huge habit. And we, unfortunately, my dad died, and my mom decided to move from the little town she was living in back to Denver. And as she would be down at her house packing things up to move to Denver, Evan would go to her house in Denver and steal things that she'd already brought up. And when she would bring things up to Denver, he would go back to her house in the little city and steal things from that house. And one thing about Evan is he always told on himself. So he told on himself, and he told me what was going on. And I told my mom what was going on. And we decided that we would call the police and teach Evan a lesson. And we thought that.
Was it a cry for help, Katherine, that he admitted that all he did?
I don't know, because he still admits to this day what he does. So I don't know. I don't know. I think he just wants to be accepted and thinks that that's how he'll be accepted. I think that he thinks that what he does is cool, and everyone will think highly of him when no one was thinking highly of him at this point.
Okay.
And so we got the police involved, and they arrested him. He had just turned 18, and he got put on probation. And the problem was he had random drug testing on probation. And so he would go and do his random drug test, and he kept turning it in dirty. It was dirty for heroin. He couldn't get off the heroin. And finally the judge said, look, one more time and I'm putting you in prison. I'm not playing around with you. And Evan didn't believe what the judge told him. And sure enough, he turned in another dirty drug test, and the judge sent a warrant for him. And I don't know how many police officers surrounded my car at the time. We were just coming back from McDonald's. I had all three of the kids in the car. Evan's the oldest, so he's got his two younger siblings with us.
Okay.
And all of these police officers surround my car, guns drawn. We all have our hands up, scared to death. Evan continues eating his cheeseburger like nothing's going on. And we're all petrified except Evan. They take Evan into custody. We went to court, and sure enough, the judge did send him to prison. And he had to complete his full sentence it was a 3-year sentence down in prison.
Wow.
And so Evan, we spent every Saturday going to see him. We spent every holiday going to see him. I spent thousands of dollars on phone calls and commissary and you name it. And unfortunately, inside prison, his drug habit got worse, and he started also doing meth. And he told the people, whoever he was getting the drugs from, the gang in prison, that I would pay for his drugs if they would just advance him the drugs. Well, we started having people drive by my house and wanting their money. They would call me at all hours of the night, and I had no idea what was going on. But once I figured out what was going on, I went straight to the warden of the prison, and Evan and his cronies got in trouble for extortion. So they eventually released Evan, and we're still dealing with this extortion case. And I hired an attorney for him. Always the loving mom hires a criminal defense attorney for him. It took every dime of my savings. And he's out of prison. He's turned his life around. He met a girl. They got married. They had a baby. Wow. He was in the process of adopting her older son. I mean, I truly couldn't have asked for anything more. He was a true joy to be around. He really turned things around and was just a pleasure to be around.
Well, the most important that you never give up on him, Katherine. That's
exactly
that really was important. He got inspired by the fact that you were so nurturing to him, even though he put you in a very difficult situation.
Well, and I'm the only person that didn't give up on him, because everyone else gave up on him. Everyone else. And so he's doing really well. But about 6 months later, I'm on the phone with them, and we're on our way to the courthouse to deal with this case. And they call me to let me know that they've broken down And I'm talking to them about, well, should I send you an Uber or should I come pick you up? Because you cannot miss this court date. And the court was in a different part of the state.
Okay.
So it took about 2.5 hours to get there. And I was almost at the courthouse and they weren't. And as we're talking, the phone shuts off. And I try to call my daughter-in-law back, and I try and I can't get an answer. And I call Evan's phone, and some guy answers the phone and says, well, the guy is still unconscious, but the lady is laying in the middle of the highway screaming that her back hurts. And I couldn't put two and two together and was like, what are you talking about? And it turns out that a semi truck had hit them. Evan had pulled his car off to the side of the road when they broke down. He was standing in front of his car looking under the hood, and she was standing next to him. And a semi truck came barreling down the highway at 80 miles an hour and rear-ended. And so my son's car ran over him, and then a semi truck ran over him and spit him 105 feet out the back of the semi truck. So both of them were airlifted to different hospitals. And that began the nightmare of who is Evan's next of kin, because his wife would normally be the next of kin, but she's in another hospital trying to recover from her own injuries. And so I had to file for legal guardianship and conservatorship of Evan. And he broke almost every bone in his body. They did many, many surgeries right after the accident. He spent 19 days in a coma, and he had to learn how to talk and walk and the whole 9 yards. And he was very confused when he woke up from his coma. He thought that his brother and sister were his kids. Obviously, they're not. It took a long time to get him to reality. It took a long time. Okay. And I was the only person. He spent about 3 months in the hospital, and I was the only person that was there to take care of him. He was discharged to my house, and his wife went home to their house, and she wasn't injured nearly as badly as Evan. But we didn't think that Evan was ever going to function normally again. He also sustained a traumatic brain injury in the middle of all of this.
What about the kids?
So,
what about Evan's
yes.
kids?
Thank goodness they weren't with them, but we went and picked them up from daycare the day of the accident. And I called my daughter-in-law's mom and said, I know that you don't see the kids very often. Would you like to see your grandkids? Because she had not been very involved with them at all prior to the accident. And she said yes. And she was supposed to pick them up for the day and bring them back. She never brought them back. And I had no legal standing to go after them. So about 8 months after that, she filed paperwork to, I can't think of the word, to sever, take away the parental rights of Evan and his wife because of the disabilities that they were facing. And there was no way that I was going to let that happen. So that started a 2.5-year custody battle to get the kids back, and so that Evan could see them again.
Yes.
So we were eventually court ordered some visitation time, quite a bit of visitation time, actually. And it just had to be supervised by me, and which was fine. And so the kids were eventually integrated back into my daughter-in-law's house. Unfortunately, this accident led to Evan and his wife divorcing. And so the kids now live with her, and Evan sees them several times a week. Evan has we went through about 4 years of just utter hell. That's the only way I can explain it. He was very angry because of the traumatic brain injury. He didn't want any help, but he needed help. He would disappear. He would run off, and I would have to call the police to find him and bring him back home. It was just a nightmare. And in between times, we had all of these appointments for brain specialists and different therapies to teach him how to go back up the stairs and how to figure out puzzles and just different things.
How was he able to leave your house or leave your environment if he just was not aware of where he was? I mean, if he had to just kind of like restructure his life, how can he be left alone and not be able to be even operational?
That's why I would have to call the police. He went through a period period of not even being able to go up the stairs at the house. But we did physical therapy long enough that he was eventually able to go up the stairs. And remember, this is over a 4-year span. So he got much better towards the like year 2.5 or 3. But he was still very confused. He would run off and get lost and not know where he was. Even though we've lived in the same house for 27 years, he would still get confused and lost.
Okay.
So he finally, the miracle of the story is he made this miraculous recovery, and he was finally able to move out. We got him a townhouse of his own about 3 miles away from my house. And he, as a matter of fact, just started driving very recently, which no one ever thought would happen. So as all of my kids are finally out of my house, I went on a date, and the man asked me what I like to do in my spare time. And I could tell him for hours what my kids like to do, but he wanted to know what I like to do. And I had spent all these years taking care of my kids. I had no idea what I like to do. I had no idea. So that kind of was a light bulb moment for me. And I spent the next few days pondering what I actually like to do. And at the same time, my daughter called, because there's always a fire somewhere when you have 3 kids. It doesn't matter how old they get to be. And so I called my daughter, or my daughter called me, and she was crying, and she had just been laid off of her job due to COVID. It was the beginning of the pandemic. So I said, why don't you come over and we'll make some soap? I have all this soap equipment in my kitchen. Come over, we'll make soap, we'll talk about it, we'll figure out what you're going to do, and then I can have my kitchen back and get rid of all this soap equipment. And she thought that was a great idea. So she came over and we made soap for days. And we wound up having so much soap and so many body products, we ran out of people to give things to. Okay. We gave them to all of our neighbors and family and friends. We still had all of this product left and didn't know what to do with it. And Rebecca said, hey, Mom, what if we started a business together? And I thought, oh, my goodness, that would be wonderful. I would love to work with my daughter. And so I said, that would be great. She left to go home and tie up some loose ends. And I got busy working on forming an LLC, getting business cards. I had never even thought about owning a small business before. So I'm researching everything and ordering all this stuff. And she comes back 2 days later and says, Mom, I chickened out. I got a job. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. I just spent all of this money and time opening this business that you wanted to open. So I reached a real crossroads and had to decide, am I going to do this business alone, or am I just going to shut it down while I'm ahead and end it? And I decided to go forth with it because it dawned on me at about the same time that I had never practiced self-care as my kids were growing up. And that was a foreign concept to me. And I would have therapists tell me, you need to take some time for yourself. You've got to take some time. And I just never did. There were always fires to put out. I was the only adult in the house that could put them out. There was always something going on with the school or going on with the neighbors or going on somewhere. There was always something. And it finally dawned on me that yes, I should have been practicing self-care, and I probably would have been a lot happier as a person and a much better mom and friend and daughter and all of those roles had I practiced self-care. So I decided to go forward with Sargent Bubbles, and it became a real mission to me to get others to practice self-care at the same time, because I know now what a big difference it makes in my life. And I know that I'm not the same person if I don't get to practice self-care. And I'm not talking about expensive vacations or expensive spa trips, or you don't need to do all that. I have learned that a nice bar of soap or a good face mask or a good body scrub can make all the difference in the world and really bring you back to center and allow you to be more giving and more thoughtful in your life, more present in your life. And it's a really nice feeling. It's a great way to be. And so we have a men's line. We have a woman's line, obviously. We're not your typical spa company. We sell adult, novelty, naughty, fun things too. we're a very fun soap company. And it's really become important to me to connect with my customers and make them happy and provide them with a good service that I know is making a difference in their life. And I really have come to enjoy that. And I'm now at a spot in my life where all three of my kids are happy and they're healthy and they're doing what they need to do. They still call me to put out fires all the time, but not nearly like they used to. And I'm really happy running my business and helping others practice self-care. So I'm happier than I've ever been.
So how's Evan now? I mean, is he like is he on his own now? Is he working? What happened with him?
He's not working, but he is on his own. We settled with the insurance company for several $1,000,000. So we put it in a trust and he is taken care of for the rest of his life.
Okay.
But he drives himself to all of his own doctor's appointments now. He is able to get to the grocery store and get his own food. He has really made a miraculous recovery. It went from the day of the accident, they told us to tell him goodbye because they didn't think he would make it through the night. And then it was that he would be a paraplegic. And then it was that he would be in a persistent vegetative state. So he has really made a miraculous recovery. And I am so proud of the work that he's done. And he sees his kids still 3 times a week at least. And they love having dad around. He's a great father. And it really has kind of come full circle. He now, as compared to when he was growing up, he would take his medicine and flush it down the toilet or throw it in the sink. He was very non-med compliant.
Mm-hmm.
His medications now, and I think that really makes a big difference.
What about his bipolar disorder? Is he still like dealing with it?
I'm sorry?
His bipolar disorder and ADHD. I mean, is he taking medication for that right now, or how is he managing those symptoms?
He is. He takes medication. He also takes some medication for his brain injury.
Okay.
So he takes a lot of medication, but it's necessary medication. And he knows that if he doesn't take it, he doesn't feel good. Okay. And that's the key to things, because he didn't like how it made him feel when he was growing up. But he knows now that if he doesn't take it, he's going to be in a world of hurt and he may have to move back in with mom. And I think that's enough.
It gives him a reason to take the medication. Absolutely. So what would you say, Katherine, to all of our listeners who are caregivers, who takes care of family members who have cancer or other illnesses? How do you let them know to put time for themselves, to be able to recharge their battery? Because obviously, being a caregiver, you kind of like lose yourself in your